Welcome DJ Tech Tools, Ian Golden back for a rare video, and lately I've been playing a lot of mobile gigs or small gigs where I don't want to bring my full club setup, and switching back and forth between a lot of different controllers, wondering what is the best all-in-one controller for Traktor? The S2, the S4, the S5, or the S8? In this video, I'll tell you, in my opinion, what is the best of the bunch and the pros and cons and values of each. First, we have the S4. This was the very first controller brought out by Native Instruments. Full disclosure, I was also heavily involved in the design of this controller, but I promise you I'll give you an honest review. Will it be my favorite? I don't know. You might be surprised. You'll have to wait till the end of the video to find out. The S4 is a great controller for anyone that requires jog wheels and full tempo range faders. It's great for that. Some of the pros, some of the things that you will really like about this are the full length pitch faders. They're very silky smooth, they work great, and these jog wheels, which are amazing for pitch bending, seeking, not so great for scratching, and of course, a lot of fun for effects tricks. Man, is it just me or is it a little cold in here now? Other pros for the S4, it's the most affordable 4-channel controller out there at only $499. It's the only one with dedicated loop recorder controls, and it stood the test of time. Even after 5 years, this controller is still one of the best-selling, if not the best-selling, all-in-one Traktor controller on the market. Some of the cons of the S4. First of all, it requires a dedicated power supply if you want to have full illumination on your controller and full volume out of the headphones. Speaking of which, that's the other downside of the S4 controller. The headphone volume is a bit low. So if you're in a bar or you're playing at home, you're not going to care. But if you're at a club, a lot of bigger DJs, and myself included, have experienced that the headphone volume on this particular sound card, which is also in the S2, is a little quiet, and you're gonna have a hard time hearing yourself over big speakers all around. Bottom line, this controller is the only choice for anyone that needs all 4 faders and jog wheels for scratching and tempo range. If you're playing sort of open format or hip-hop style mixing, in Traktor, this is probably your best choice by far. Next, I brought out the S2, which was sort of a simpler, more condensed version of the ideas in the S4. They took away 2 channels, stripped out some of the screens, some of the extra displays, a lot of the additional features, made it very simple, smaller, and a lot more affordable. Here are the pros of the S2. It's the most affordable of the group at only $299. I've seen these things on eBay for as little as $200. It's the most portable. It's very compact, very light, and it works really well with just a USB. So you don't need to bring a power supply, just a single USB connected to your computer. It'll also run off an iPad or iPod. Okay, the cons of the S2. Like the S4, the headphone jacks are a little bit quiet. They're also in the front, which in the end, I didn't like as much. I originally thought this was a good idea. Didn't turn out to be so bright. The headphone volumes are a little bit low. The loop displays are missing. Really miss those. On the S4, you have loop displays that tell you the length of the loop that's activated. Kind of a bummer not to have those when you're DJing live. While you can turn up the levels on decks C and D using this center knob, it's not terribly useful. So if you're really playing with more than 2 decks, the S2 starts to fall down at that point. Bottom line, if you're on a budget and you're only mixing 2 decks or just getting started with Traktor, I think the S2 is an amazing controller for beginners because it's affordable, portable, and really easy to use and understand. Into my world, into my A couple years later, after the S2, NI brought out the big boy, the S8, which can double as your chest press or shoulder press if you want. Lots of value for your money. All joking aside, it is pretty heavy and it is pretty big. The S8 is the granddaddy of all the controllers. It gives you every feature in Traktor on a control surface, sort of the Cadillac model. You've got your faders for stem decks, you've got your Traktor scratch mode, you've got dedicated filters, you've got replaceable faders, everything you want, but all those features come at a price. It's bigger, it's heavier, and it's the most expensive of the bunch at $1,200. This was also Native Instruments' first major redesign. It was kind of almost a hiccup in the design process. The S8 departed radically from the S2 and S8. For example, moving browse and loop up away from their original positions and now over here. It also associated loop with the display rather than dedicated loop numbers. Little things like that where they kind of changed the fundamental workflows of the controller, and in my opinion, not totally for the better. So what are the pros of the S8? First of all, these two big giant screens are great for stem and remix deck control. You have a lot of visibility, a lot of customizability, they look great, and they give you a lot of insight into what's happening in your mix right next to your mixer, which is phenomenal. That kind of integration. I don't have to go over here to the computer to figure out what's going on. I can stay right here at the controller. The sound card was the first big step up. In the S8 and the S5, we got a new sound card from the S2 and the S4. Roughly the same quality, but much louder outputs on the headphones and better output options on the back of the controllers, including balanced XLR outputs. You've got full 8 faders for all stems. This is when stem decks were launched, and if you've got a stem deck running on this deck, you have dedicated filter and fader controls for each part of that song, which I personally found to be absolutely critical if you really want to use that technology to its full benefit. What are the cons of the S8? There's a few. Obviously, it's big, it's heavy, it's expensive, and the design breaks many of the workflows that I came to love, and I think many of you did as well with the S2 and the S4. It's also too large for your average backpack or even a dedicated bag. It's quite large for just throwing on your back. It is great as a Cadillac model to leave in the home if you want controls for everything. And that's what this controller is great for. If you're an avid Traktor user and you've got stems, you've got remix decks, you're rocking all 4 decks, fading bass lines out, fading vocals out, this honestly is the only option for you. If you're really using stems, this is the controller for you. You can see what's happening, you have dedicated controls for those stems, and you have dedicated controls for every other feature in Traktor right underneath your fingertips. Finally, we have the Kontrol S5, in which NI seemed to take all of the knowledge from the previous 3 controllers and integrate it into one clean but pretty robust controller. Very similar to the S4, in fact, it's the exact same size and format. You've got 4 decks and 2 switchable decks on the side. What they learned from the S8 was to put the good sound cards in there and manage to get the screens in as well, but at a more affordable price. What I really like is that they brought some of the workflow stuff back from the S4 that seemed to be working really well. For example, dedicated browse knob and loop right above all your functions with a dedicated loop display. Really liked those. They also left the Q mix and the Q volume knobs on top of the controller and managed to keep the interface and the overall design really clean and really simple, similar to the S2. The pros of the S5 are dedicated filter knobs and buttons on each deck, loud cleared headphones, XLR outputs, dedicated browse knobs on each side, and moving the Q mix and Q volume on top of the controller instead of the front. These are all as compared to the S4 because those are the 2 controllers you're probably comparing with each other. The cons, of course, are no clear way to adjust tempo per track. You only have this master tempo knob, which works fine, but really is based off the sync model, which is more appropriate for electronic DJing than, say, the open format hip-hop style. If you're playing that style of music, you're probably going to miss the dedicated pitch faders that are on the S4, and you're certainly going to miss the jog wheels. The stem control, although present, honestly is not that great. You just really need those dedicated filters and faders to truly be able to use stems, because you want to be able to drop in or out each of the elements in the song at will without going through different menus and fiddling with some of these knobs. Not super practical for stem use, but for electronic 4-deck mixing, the S5 is perfect. So who's this one good for? 4-deck electronic DJs that are mostly using sync are gonna love it. It's got everything you need. Full visibility into each deck, all the basic essential controls you need, and 4 full channels of mixing, including gain, EQ, and filter, all in a nice, very cleanly labeled and cleanly spaced mixer without a lot of clutter. If you don't need jog wheels, it's got everything you need. Basically, it gets you the stuff you want, 4 decks, full mixing, all the bells and whistles, but without the price of the S8. This thing comes in at $699 on average, give or take, depending on the sale that's currently going on. All right, so wrap up. Who's the winner? What's the best all-in-one DJ controller for Traktor by Native Instruments? There's 4 options. There can only be one winner. First of all, of course, this is my opinion. This is my experience, and I do have a lot of experience. I've been taking a lot of these controllers, all 4 of them, out to different gigs, trying the S4, trying the S2, trying the S5, trying the S8, and really got a good sense of which one was truly practical for being my go-to controller for mobile gigs like my yoga stuff, little bars, or maybe a friend's house party. You know, for the bigger stuff, if I go to a club, full disclosure, I'm still using a traditional mixer with a pair of X1s next to it. But if I just want to grab something, go and play a simple set, my go-to controller, without a doubt, is the S5. Again, it takes everything that I seem to learn from all the previous controllers and puts it into one simple, clean interface. The big things for me here are the dedicated filter on-off switches. In a club, it's really big. You don't know if the filter's slightly off, slightly down. You might end up losing half of your low end and not even realizing it. Also, having the Q volume and Q mix on top really made it practical for live mixing use, especially if you're mixing in the headphones, which I often do. The outputs being XLR and the headphones being loud finally made this thing actually usable in a slightly larger venue. I wouldn't take it to a huge club, but if I really need to hear myself, those 2 are required for it being practical in that context. I do miss the jog wheels and the tempo faders, I gotta be honest with you, but I'm willing to give those up in exchange for the screens, the bigger dedicated Q buttons, and all the new features that are on this controller. In which case, I think the S5 is the best balance of new features and old workflow at a decent price. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please subscribe, like it, share with your friends, or just use the information to get yourself the right controller for you. All of these will work. They're all great controllers that work for different contexts. We hope that you'll support DJ Tech Tools with your dollars should you decide to buy any of them in our store, which is dedicated to, for, and only about digital DJing at djtechtools.com.